Welcome to episode 7 of Rogue Mode 0 to 40 in Flight of Nova. Presently, I'm at grade 9, and I'm out at the greenhouse. So let me see if my controller's connected. Yeah, my controller's connected. I always got trouble with that. And we'll see where I left off. And the objective will be to get to 40 as quickly as possible without compromising my favorite bits of gameplay. So, for example, I always like to go to the dock port before I go to the landing pad. I do that every single time. I could do a full 180, backtrack, pick up this freight, and then go to Galdar. So it's not the best. I would normally want to go to a dock port right this minute, actually. But I don't want to go any longer than I have to because I already got to turn all the way around up here in space. So there's my destination target. You see that over there? And I'm gradually flying away from it at orbital velocity. So this is actually one of the frustrations of the game, is that it doesn't give you the mission before your re-entry window. It gives you your mission after you pass it overhead. So you've got a timed mission, but then you got to do a full orbit to come back around and go down to that thing. And man, I wish they would give you the mission so that you just are ready to go for it. So I know that it's a proximity thing. So I don't know. Maybe they just need to have a predictive proximity, an object that predicts, that's out ahead of the space station, that triggers the missions instead of the ship itself. But then you might need to have those bases loaded in. I don't know. It might be a pain in the butt for performance. Alright, here we go. Coming back the other direction. 3,000 kilometers out. And I just need to get up to a reasonable velocity. Not exactly something you would normally do in real life. Just do a UE while in orbit. Wouldn't describe it as the most fuel efficient maneuver. Alright, we're coming up on orbital velocity. I don't want to really exceed orbital velocity at this point, because I want to kind of perform a standard re-entry at this point. So we'll call that 7,800 meters per second. And now I'll be moving towards the destination instead of away from it. And we'll just grab that platinum. Oh. Well, that mission wasn't there yet. Here's a mission for Galdar. So what we might do is go out to Galdar, drop off something, and then once we get out to Galdar, we might have a really nice mission. Alright. We to get some mud. I think we need a lower altitude at this point. Alright, so let me try to look and see where Galdar is. Galdar is on the whole other side of the planet and getting further away. What a long wait that's going to be. So while it's true this mission might be worth a lot of experience, it might take a long time to get it done. And I might need some juice here. It's probably not too bad. Normally I would be going quite a bit faster at this distance to target. But I'd also be doing special braking maneuvers. Alright, I think we're lined up pretty good. We might start losing a little bit of altitude here. I may need to use my engines again, but not that much. I'll be getting pretty close right here. It actually might come right down on top of it.
TL01 craft, base 132 ground. We have you on screen.
Here we are. Now it's time to pick up this platinum and wait for the lunch window. Alright, Station Galdar will be a long ways away. I could go over to the launch site. We're at 0.7 latitude, but the thing about it is Galdar's altitude is so unbelievably high that at that altitude our latitude offset is not even gonna make a difference. I mean, it's just not gonna make a difference. I'm gonna end up having to make corrections and stuff on the way out there, no matter what happens. At 3,000 kilometers to apoapsis, I'm going to not burn it that great deal of an offset. That's what I'm gonna do. Although I'd kind of rather overburn and then halfway there kind of wobble onto the 0 lat. Then try to do that right as I'm rendezvousing with the station. I'm just gonna try to go for the rendezvous first, and then whatever corrections I need to make, hopefully I'll a little overcompensate, and then I'll kind of wobble onto that 0. So I'm gonna go east. And just a tiny bit south. I'm gonna go for that 50 degrees. Throw like 4 trims on there. There's the greenhouse blowing by me. And actually Galdar should already be pretty close to overhead. So once I'm at 40 degrees, that's when I'll be able to see my apoapsis. But I'm not going to pause and burn because 40 kilometers, I'm sorry. Alright, so there's my apoapsis is going to appear. And now I just need to burn it all the way out to 3,000 kilometers. See, my inclination is actually quite steep. That might be too much inclination. Oh, now I'm in space. My controls just switched on me. So now I'm no longer inverted. So for some reason I decided that it would be great, and I'm not changing my mind, that my controls would be inverted on aerodynamics and non-inverted in space. Just as everyone's, especially when I fly third person, every once in a while I like go the wrong direction. Alright, apoapsis is past 1,000 kilometers. 1,500 kilometers now. We're halfway done burning out there, huh? ,2,000 kilometers. All right, we're coming up on 3 years, 2,500 kilometers altitude of the apoapsis. 3,000. So now we're at 300 kilometers actual altitude of the ship. And we're just gonna wait until we float on up to the appropriate altitude. And as we get closer, we'll see how close my dog leg is. So I definitely overcompensated. I'll be definitely wobbling. So I'm gonna watch that latitude tick down to 0. And when it ticks down to 0, I'm gonna burn north and try to zero out my inclination. And I'm thinking that that's gonna happen well before I reach 3,000 kilometers, because I'm already at 500 kilometers, but that's actually, I'm gonna slow down as I get higher and higher. And I have no idea how much distance 0.2 degrees latitude is, but I don't think I'm gonna need to wait until I'm at 3,000 kilometers for that. Oh yeah, I'm taking it right down. So because I don't want to affect my apoapsis, I'm gonna try to be as level as possible on the northern vector. And then as soon as that thing ticks over to 0, I don't know how it ticks or whatever, but then I want to be full juiced, and I want a 0 inclination. So I'm going to back it up with the RCS. There we go, 0 inclination. So now I want to get aimed back east, which is going to be the vector they were going to burn for circularization. And then we just want to monitor that latitude, because if it ticks up to a 0.1 or -1, then we know we got a tiny correction to make. But at inclination 0, it can't be that big of a number, so 1,000 kilometers coming up, altitude. (1,000 kilometers). Water out of the glass wine bottle. So I don't know how long this trip takes. When you think about it, it's 23 minutes in right now to the video. This is our first mission. Well, we did have to do that reverse in orbit. That took at least 10 minutes. So a normal trip to orbit, to low Earth orbit at about 180 kilometers, is about 8 minutes in real life. And this game is comparable. It's in there. This one is a little quicker, I think, to get to that orbit. This vehicle is 6 minutes maybe. But you have to think in real life, you know, they have a whole stage separation event, and they might be going a little higher altitude than 180 kilometers, and their circularization, once the spaceship is in space in real life, it does not have the same thrust as the launch vehicle has when for the initial ascent phase. Like launching from the pad in real life, a rocket has an enormous amount of thrust. But that vehicle, once it gets up into space, I don't think, I'm just talking out of my ass, it's true, but I don't think it has anywhere near the thrust for the reason why the booster needs to be so powerful is because of the air friction. But once the vehicle is higher up at altitude, out into space and stuff like that, it can take longer to accelerate because gravity is working on it, but nothing like the air is working on it in the lower atmosphere. Nothing is going to slow it down as much as the air friction. So this vehicle, though, every maneuver I make is at the same thrust that is available to the vehicle on the ground, because it's the same engines that are launching me off of the ground is that I'm using up in circularization burns and stuff like that. So my whole trip to space is on that same power that can get me right off the ground. So that does save a couple minutes, I think, in the last part of the trip. So between the little floats for stage separation, probably some efforts for better trajectory, a much more specific trajectory because of aerodynamic concerns and fuel efficiency concerns, and then the fact that the upper stages they don't get to have as much thrust to weight as this vehicle does. So in real life, you're in an 8 minutes trip, and in this game, to a 180 kilometers orbit, you're about a 6 minutes trip. So it's not that different, actually. All right, coming up on 2,000 kilometers altitude, only 1,000 kilometers more to go. Galdar is not moving. That means my trajectory is good. So relative to Galdar, we don't appear to be moving one direction or the other, we're just towards each other. I'm now within range to see the target icon. My velocity is slowing down quite a bit, though. The last 1,000 kilometers are going to be much slower of an ascent than the first and second 1,000 kilometers because I'm not burning my engines at this point of the trip, so I'm just gradually losing velocity to gravity as I near the apoapsis of my parabolic ballistic trajectory. Orbital velocity at 3,000 kilometers is significantly lower than orbital velocity at 180 kilometers. It's down around 6,800 meters per second or something like that in this game. So I actually can get a little bit closer to the station before I have to circularize. I'm not sure what my trajectory is going to line me up like. I guess at these stations out here, if there was more objects at distances like this that were fairly close together, so another station not that too terribly far away from Galdar, at that point, in an old school space game, if they tried to have realistic physics, you'd just have a space station in fixed space and then another space station in fixed space, and if you were going to fly from one space station to the other, there would be no orbital mechanics to consider. You would just accelerate towards that space station, and then after a little while you would decelerate so that you don't smash into this. You need a time to decelerate. Once you start getting into wider and wider orbits, your trajectory as a result of orbit is a straighter and straighter line for those two objects. So it wouldn't go away completely, but you would get much, much closer to not having to be worried about orbital mechanics at all. So if you were in orbit around the sun, flying from one space station in orbit around the sun to another space station in orbit around the sun, and their orbits were all the way out of the asteroid belt, then your trip, you might not even care about orbital mechanics. For you, the amount of time of your trip in a futuristic spaceship like this, where you just got like the full amount of fuel that a Saturn V starts off on the Earth at, then you would leave that space station and you would pretty much fly in a straight line to that other space station. So for the purpose of space games like this, you would be able to do that. Of course, in real life, there would be some consideration of the absolute lack of a Saturn V's worth of propellant. But in that case, a very efficient rendezvous trip might take a very long time. So we're about 500 kilometers away from our altitude target, 1,200 kilometers away from our station target. I'm pretty sure the station is moving at about 6,800 kilometers per 6,800 meters per second. I'll be slowing down a little bit closer to 3,000 meters per second by then, so I'll just circularize. I'll just accelerate about 3,000 meters per second. Inclination is still 0, but let's check a look at our altitude is still 0. Our latitude, excuse me, is still 0, so that's nice. Let me line Galdar up with some point on the ship, and then what we'll do is we'll see. It looks like actually Galdar is changing, but we gotta see if it looks like it's moving higher up on the screen at this point. That means that we need to accelerate in that direction to be moving directly towards Galdar. I mean, relative to the planet, we're moving away from Galdar. And Galdar is moving at us faster than we are moving away from it. But relative to Galdar, we are moving towards Galdar because Galdar is booking it in orbit. But it's looking pretty stable. That means my trajectory is probably pretty good. I mean, we're up at 2,700 kilometers, so we're only 300 kilometers away from our apoapsis target. And indeed, our distance to Galdar is shrinking appropriately. So now we're right in that same part of the trip that we would be right after leaving the atmosphere for a 188 station. I'm looking at Galdar approaching from 800 kilometers away. It's 33 minutes, so I've been rambling on about this for, I mean, we're more than 10 minutes into this trip, I think, in total. One concern I have is that my burn, once I get there, I don't have a way to really, I can't do that well at lining up my east. So once I do start burning, my inclination is going to change, and I'll have to make corrections at that time, just while burning. So my instrumentation is not accurate enough to just burn blindly. I have to watch the video game local velocity indicator and see how it's all going. Alright, so Galdar is coming up on us. We're going to be into that 400 kilometers. Now I get the relative velocity rating pretty soon. We're only gaining altitude at 3,000 meters per second. And actually, that's not how our gaining altitude, that's our velocity, but we are in a fairly horizontal trajectory at this point. Our FPA is 17. So gaining at 3,000 meters per second would be an FPA of 90. We're looking a little bit low, like we're behind our target. But we're not playing with that much velocity here. Only 3.42 kilometers per second relative velocity instead of 5. So I think it's okay to wait a little bit. Alright, I'm gonna turn my engine on. Max throttle. And we're gonna be at a fairly shallow rendezvous. I'm gonna tilt my vehicle up a little bit. I'm gonna go blowing past this Galdar at this rate. So I better get lined up to start slowing down. And get slowing down so that I can reduce my approach to below 1 kilometer per second. Alright, here we go. Now, Galdar has every dock port occupied, which means no fun for me. I have to go straight to the landing pad. Normally, I try to go to a dock port before going to a landing pad just for the sake of docking practice. But as you can see, there is both a freighter and a Kalum EX5. And so because of this, there are no open dock ports on Galdar yet. I mean, maybe the station will get an update where it'll get more than 4 total. But at one point, the game had a maximum of 4 total docking stations on every station, which is no longer the case. But because Galdar is kind of like way out here, it just hasn't gotten that update yet. Alright, now hopefully this is the end of this mission. It is! And what does that mean? We can accept this mission right here. But first I'm going to change ships. No, first I'm going to accept the mission. I really don't want this thing to try to tell me to go to a landing pad that's not available. Alright. Alright. Alright, we're good. Alright, so now I just go to the dock bay. Select Calum EX5. Refuel. Grab this phase capacitor.
EX5, Station Goldar. Proceed with the docking approach.
And at the moment, it looks like what my plan is going to be, depending on where this destination is, Broom Larson. Oh man, I gotta try. So I'm just gonna do a full powered return to the planet. Not even gonna worry about rendezvousing with Da Costa Station. Normally what I would do is wait for the re-entry window down there at Da Costa Station. Just fly down to Da Costa and wait for that window there. This is gonna be really stressful because gravity is gonna be working against me. So I'm not sure what kind of velocity I'm gonna need to reach and what kind of altitude I'm gonna need to start hitting the brakes. You would think that I've played this game enough to know this kind of thing, but I just never go to Galdar and I never pay attention, and I never re-enter from Galdar because I don't know how far away the ground base should be and what FPA and what altitude to hit the. I always fly down to a station and do it that way. See, at this point, I'm gaining so much velocity, right? Because I'm not canceling my velocity. So right now I'm blasting it at 10.4 kilometers per second. 10. So I'm going to be at about 11 kilometers per second when I'm done. Now I'm aimed directly at the target. But I'm going to need 1,000 kilometers altitude to shed that velocity. I mean, maybe not, but maybe I do. So let me get lined up right away so that when that time comes, I'm just gonna get blasting. Wrong button. Kill rotation. See, I'm dropping altitude a lot faster than I gained it. So I might start hitting the brakes at like 1,000 kilometers altitude. With the 188 stations, I've done those stations over and over again, following just the game's recommendations, and I just do the same thing every time. I never change it. Coming in from Galdar, though, I can spend more than one occasion of oopsing and crashing into the atmosphere at orbital velocity and burning into a crisp. And I don't mean an Australian chip. So actually my velocity is even higher now because I've been falling on top of my burn. So I'm actually going to go ahead at 1,000 kilometers. I'm going to start slowing down. And it'll increase my trip time and I'll have to fly down intentionally, but if I do that, or maybe at 700. If I do that, then I'll know I'll be safe. Here goes Norvig. I'm gonna get right past that station. Look at that. I'm coming so close to that bad boy. Engines on. Coming within 100 kilometers of Norvig station. Coming within 60 kilometers just about. Coming within 55. Coming within 55 kilometers of Norvig station. Velocity is coming down to 9.5 kilometers per second. More casually aimed here. Alright, now I'm at 500 kilometers altitude, but I'm only at 6,700 meters per whatever, so I can drop a little bit more. Nice and safe. I mean, I can probably run myself all the way down to 250 and be happy. I'm gonna play it nice and safe. I'll let my altitude drop below 300, but I'm not going to wait for 250. No, I'm going to wait for 250. I'm not going to wait for 250. I'm going 7,000 meters per second. That 250 approaches so quickly. ...200 kilometers altitude. So I only have about 100 kilometers of space left. $160. All right, now I'm going at a speed that this ship, I could probably just fall from here and it would get hot, but I think I would survive it. All right, coming down to about 120. Now I'm hitting the air. I'm just going to slow it down to under 3,000. I mean, my FPA is negative 37. I'm going straight to the planet. So now at this point, I really want to be sub 2,000. I'm going to go ahead and turn around. Let myself friction into a more vertical nose front. And from this point, I'm just going to use, I'm going to pull up here in a second. Alright, I'm going to start pulling up right now. So this thing can really take some heat. This vehicle could take the most heat out of any of the vehicles. And I'm not even going to get into the blazing fire. So it's a very safe re-entry. Used a lot of propellant. More than half of the propellant is consumed. I don't know, looks like I'm coming up on a air cargo. And then we're just going to actually take a break and see if I made it to 10. I think this will put me at 10 based on how many bars the difficulty said.
EP7 craft, base 160 ground. Welcome to our airspace. EX5, Skybarge at Tori. Hey there.
Alrighty, let's watch this pilot grade. And I gotta tell you, it's coming up on an hour right now. If we make 10, I might call that an episode. Yep, we made 11. And we made 10. Alright, so actually I'm gonna take this Palmas mission. Because the base 154 is only 28 kilometers away, and I'm already in the right vehicle for the Neural Imprinter KL7. And look at this, I might make 11. Palmas is only 458 kilometers, so it doesn't look like it's going to get me all the way to 11, but I'll get pretty close. This thing is very powerful compared to the freighter. Oh, Palmas is close by. Man, I'm getting really close to that other station now, too. Under 600 kilometers from Palmas Station. About 100 kilometers from my altitude target. This vehicle has a lot more thrust than the other ones. But I'm not confident in my latitude. Yeah, I'm falling a little short on my altitude, it looks like, but we'll get up to velocity and then we'll float out a little bit.
EX5, Palmer Station, good to see you. We have you on approach.
Little bit of an overshoot, but playing on the power of this vehicle, it lined up perfectly. And we have the pleasure of a dockport mission.
EX5, Palmer Station, proceed with the docking approach.
The thrusters are quite a bit more powerful in this thing too. Which leaves me battling a very sensitive pitch. All right, let's see if we got to level 11. That would be the lucky number 11. Palma Station. I would just call that a video, call it a wrap. Nope, there's no way. But over 1 hour, that's good enough for today. It's a case of the Mondays. Time for video game break anyway. Man, we did get close though. All right. Thank you very much.